administration to consumers who are already struggling?
The Trump administration has been all in on lowering energy prices, and I would say quite successfully. Gasoline today is still $1.50 a gallon cheaper than it was in the middle of the Biden administration. But you're right, we want it back below $3 a gallon, and it will be again before too long.
You just heard from Chris Wright, Donald Trump's U.S. Energy Secretary, but it may take longer than expected to make good on that promise you just heard from the Secretary, especially as the price of oil continues to soar. In fact, Brent crude surging past $100 a barrel on Sunday. Now, this is the first time the global benchmark has crossed that mark since Russia's invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. You can see where numbers are right now with oil prices soaring past $114 per barrel, that 25% climb. WTI, the U.S. oil benchmark, also hitting its highest level since 2022. And President Trump, though, he's trying to calm any fears of rising fuel costs here in the U.S. In a Truth Social post, the president said in part, quote, "Short-term oil prices are a very small price to pay for USA and the world's safety and peace." But those surging prices, they've been grabbing some investors who look at some of the futures there all across the board down as we enter another week of trading. And traders are very worried, as you can imagine, that the lengthy spike in fuel prices, that it could cause inflation to rise and potentially even damage the economy. I do want to show you also where some of the Asia Pacific markets sit at this hour, where you can also see markets across the board dropping anywhere from 7% or possibly as low as 1%, where you see in some cases. Let's go now to CNN's Mike Valerio joining us from Beijing with much more on the situation. Mike, it's good to see you again. Look, you have this conflict certainly causing disruptions in oil distribution. I wonder if you can walk our viewers around the world through what this means when it comes to global markets.
Right, and specifically what it means to friends and family in America back home. So we're broadcasting now from Beijing. You saw the red and the numbers right there, how traders are responding. A sharp sell-off in Tokyo and in Seoul, down around 7%. But I want to stress to Americans that even if these numbers are in the red around the world and people back home are thinking, well, America is a huge producer of oil, this is not going to impact us. It certainly will, because yes, America is a huge producer of oil. But if there are disruptions here in Asia, in the Middle East, shortages, American producers are still going to sell at higher prices to all of these markets, like where we are right now, that could be experiencing shortages, because the oil market is a global market. So even though the production of oil might be fine in America, what we pay in California, New Hampshire, Alabama, everywhere in between, is going to be felt by these, is going to be affected and feeling these disruptions, and this is why all of these numbers in the red matter. So I want to focus specifically, Polo, on Taiwan, for example. This is an area, this is an island that imports so much of its energy supply from the Middle East, and specifically our reporting has really honed in on liquid natural gas. So according to the cabinet of Taiwan, coming out with this statement to the public writ large, they said Taiwan's cabinet has enough liquid natural gas, according to the reporting from the body, for March, and is working to ensure that it has sufficient liquid natural gas for April. So when we think about that statement, Taiwan, why is it important? In addition to being a bastion of democracy in Asia, it manufactures so many important things that we need. The hub for advanced chip manufacturing throughout the world. So if there's a problem, a disruption with its energy supply, perhaps when you follow that through to conclusion, that means perhaps an economic slowdown, perhaps an increase in prices of what we buy from Taiwan. Furthermore, let's look at where Taiwan gets its liquid natural gas. About a third from Qatar, another third from Australia. So when we get into the weeds with these numbers, we don't want to suggest that anybody is going to run out of fuel, but that is a significant chunk that this key economic engine gets from the Middle East. So as we're entering a new week, that is something we are acutely watching below.
Yeah, it's an important point. The fuel will be there. It's just going to cost a lot more potentially. I mean, diesel prices here in the U.S., I was looking at numbers,
Right.
Mike, now $4.51 a gallon. For farmers, growing season around the corner, certainly now has that trickle down effect that you just walked us through. So again, CNN's Mike Valerio, really appreciate all that for viewers around the world. We do want to get some more now from CNN senior political analyst and Bloomberg columnist Ron Brownstein. Ron, it's great to see you again.
Good to be with you.
Let's pick up on where we left off in our conversation just yesterday, especially as the administration continues to keep on the table this idea, or at least the possibility, that it could potentially send U.S. troops into Iran. Now, if President Trump does decide to go that route, maybe even send special forces in, specifically to seize Iran's nuclear stockpile, how much support do you think he may get from the American public?
Special forces, maybe support. Large ground troop invasion, which I would say there's no planning for it. It doesn't really seem to be on the horizon. I think very little support. Even the gas prices, I think, are a real pressure point. You know, when the president says this is a small price to pay, the vast majority of Republican voters will agree with that, as they have been supporting this, and that will keep almost all Republican elected officials in line. But you just can't overstate the two underlying factors: that he is starting this war with the majority of Americans opposing, which is something we have very rarely seen to discuss. And he's also starting it with a significant majority believing he has failed to make progress on the biggest thing they elected him to deal with, which is their cost of living. So he is just extremely vulnerable, I think, to the idea that this conflict is driving up costs for Americans at the pump. They just don't see that great a stake in it, I think, that would, in their mind, justify paying more every week in the way that it is described.
Help us to secure this unconditional surrender.
Yeah, look, I think that's one thing we have seen from the president. You know, he is a very ideological president in many ways, but he is also kind of a ruthless pragmatist, and he has shown himself willing to reverse course and cut his losses, as we talked about before. I mean, just look at how quickly they basically backed down in Minneapolis. I thought, you know, if Minneapolis had gone well for them, they probably would have taken that show on the road to other major blue cities. But after the killing of the 2 American citizens and the intense backlash, he basically has kind of really toned it down. And I think you could see here, I mean, they have accomplished a lot of what they set out to do. They have basically eradicated the top leadership of the country. They have degraded its military capability. And I do think that if the costs start to mount, that he may be much more willing to say, basically declare victory and go home than some of his allies, both like Lindsey Graham or Benjamin Netanyahu, might prefer.
It's great to get your perspective, Ron, as we face what will likely be another very eventful week ahead. Ron Brownstein, appreciate your time.